สวัสดีค่ะต้อนรับคุณผู้ชมเข้าสู่ Deep Talk นะคะวันนี้พบกับกอย่าไอราดาพิศวรรณค่ะวันนี้นะคะเราจะคุยกันเกี่ยวกับเรื่องเศรษฐกิจเหมือนเช่นเคยค่ะแต่ว่าวันนี้อาจจะพิเศษนิดนึงนะคะเพราะว่าเราจะคุยในมุมมองของต่างชาติที่มองเข้ามาในประเทศไทยบ้างนะคะเพราะว่าปกติแล้วเนี่ยเราก็มักจะคุยกับภาคธุรกิจไทยหรือว่านักเศรษฐศาสตร์ไทยเป็นหลักนะคะ เพียงแต่ว่าตอนนี้เนี่ยโลกกำลังเจอกับความปั่นป่วนและเราเองก็พยายามจะหาทางรอดหาโอกาสทางเศรษฐกิจไทยในมุมมองแบบระดับโลกมากขึ้นนะคะวันนี้ก็เลยเป็นโอกาสดีค่ะที่กอย่าเชิญแขกรับเชิญท่านนี้มานะคะท่านเป็นคนที่มีความเชี่ยวชาญเกี่ยวกับเรื่องของภาคธุรกิจโดยเฉพาะความสัมพันธ์ระหว่าง EU กับประเทศไทยนะคะซึ่งก็จะมาพูดคุยกันว่าในมุมของคนที่มองจาก outside in เข้ามาเนี่ย เห็นเศรษฐกิจไทยยังไงบ้างนะคะแล้วก็หลังจากนี้ความท้าทายของเศรษฐกิจไทยในยุคที่ geopolitics ปั่นป่วนเนี่ยเราควรวางตัวเองยังไงค่ะวันนี้นะคะกอย่าก็ได้รับเกียรตินะคะจากคุณโน Clehan ค่ะซึ่งท่านเป็น Global Head of Public Policy ที่ BDO นะคะแล้วก็ยังเป็น Vice Chairman แล้วก็ Member of the Executive Board of the EU ASEAN Business Council นะคะวันนี้ให้เกียรติมาพูดคุยกับเรานะคะ Hello Noel yeah สวัสดีค่
Sawadee คุณกุย
ะ
pleasure to be here.
Welcome to the show. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much for your time today spending with us. Could you please introduce yourself a bit? Like, what have you been doing so far?
Thank you, Goya. Pleasure to be here. As you said in your introduction, I'm the Global Head of Public Policy at BDO, which is a global professional services firm, a global office based in Brussels, where I am located, and we're in 160 something countries around the world. Uh, I'm here in Thailand this week and last week in my capacity as representing BDO on the EU ASEAN Business Council, which is the voice of European businesses across the ASEAN region. BDO is a member, and as you mentioned, I am the vice chairman currently of that council.
So it's mean like you will have a lot of information and advice to Thai economy from the global perspective as well. So I'd like to start from the broad perspective, especially in Thai economy, since you might have heard about Thai election for the last time, which gained a lot of political stability in Thailand. So it's very important to talk about stability in politics because it means the long-term policy implementation. In your perspective, do you see the change since the last election in Thailand?
Yeah, that's a very good starting question. I mean, politics is essential to stability. Political stability is essential to businesses in terms of considering investment and I follow Thailand's politics very closely from a personal point of view. So I'm aware of the elections and all of that last year and then this year. Um, eh, I guess what Thailand has now is political stability, unlike maybe some previous years. Um, where European businesses welcome that is that it brings consistency of policy, stability, predictability, and the possibility of long-term planning by your government, the Royal Thai government, which is exactly what businesses need. Businesses like the possibility to plan long-term, particularly when it comes to inward investment. So the business council that I'm here representing is consisting of multinational companies who want to invest in Thailand, or in many cases already are here. What they want is to see regulatory reform and a more enabling policy environment. You can get that with a stable political environment.
At this time, we can see the ongoing tension around the world, especially in Iran and the US, right? Or the trade war between the US and China. But why Thailand? Like, I would like to ask that why Europe still believe in Thailand.
Yeah, well, I guess to the first part of your comment, the world is very different now to maybe 3, 4 years ago, and certainly 10 years ago. What we used to call the rules-based international order has been somewhat upended. There's a lot more tension in the system. Globalization as we knew it is changing. It's not dead. I would stress globalization is not dead. In fact, trade is continuing to grow around the world, particularly trade in services. But the multipolar world that we have now replaces, the kind of stability, globalization, rules-based order world of the past. Southeast Asia, shall we call it ASEAN, is a very important region for the world economy. As a bloc, it's the fifth largest economy in the world now, and many predictions are that it will be the third or fourth by 2030. Thailand is the second largest economy within this region, quite industrialized, the most industrialized by some metrics of the Southeast Asian countries. So in that sense, it's very important for European businesses seeking to diversify their supply chains. It's also a heavily strategic location for serving the region, as well as being a significant market in its own right. It's a country of 71 million people, is a market. But I think European businesses have always found Thailand a favoured destination for investment, more industrialised than many of the other ASEAN countries. And in the current climate, where everybody is seeking to diversify, not just the European companies, but companies all over the world are looking to find new suppliers, new markets, reduce their dependencies on, for example, the US or China, whether as a market or as a supplier. ASEAN represents a really credible and viable third option. Not just ASEAN, but middle powers like Canada and Australia are also part of the solution. And you see with European trade policy, increasingly, trade agreements being signed with Australia recently, with India, with Mercosur in South America. There is almost a rush to accelerate trade policies. But with Southeast Asia, trade policies, trade negotiations rather, have been active and live with Indonesia, which is more or less concluded now, with Thailand, and I'm sure we'll talk about that later, with the Philippines and with Malaysia. And when those four are concluded, and I firmly believe they will be sometime in the next 6 to 12 months, all four, when you add those to the agreements with Singapore and Vietnam, then European Union will have trade agreements with the 6 largest economies in ASEAN. And with no disrespect to the other 5, those are the 6 that matter economically. The other countries are growing as well, but they're not as significant for Europe. So Thailand, as I said, is the second largest, but probably the most industrialized, is hugely significant. It also has a very impressive industrial ecosystem. It has a very impressive infrastructure, and it has ambition. As one of your senior policymakers said to me last week, after some years maybe of drifting a little bit in terms of economic policy, Thailand is back and it has a plan. And we feel that. European businesses
You
feel
feel
that.
that?
We absolutely feel it. Yeah. The meetings we had in the last few days here in Bangkok, it's clear that there is a reform agenda. There is now the political stability to deliver that. Of course, delivery is the issue. You must deliver the reforms, not just talk about them.
Okay, so before we delve more into Thailand, I'd like to focus mainly on the broad picture of ASEAN that you mentioned earlier. That ASEAN will have a lot of potential, especially this time when the trade tension going. You mentioned about market size, the potential of ASEAN in several ways, but as you may know that among ASEAN countries, we are now trying to compete with each other as well because we, as a ASEAN country, we have different competitiveness.
Yeah.
I'd like to raise some example. For example, the Vietnam.
Yeah.
Vietnam is its rise is very impressive, especially the GDP, right? Because especially this year, Vietnam is expected to grow around double digit.
Yeah.
Indonesia, they have their own market size. They have the nickel, which very important to produce the battery.
Yeah.
Malaysia, they already established the electronic hub, especially in Penang,
Yeah.
or Singapore, which is financial district.
Yeah.
How Thailand can compete and to attract investment among ASEAN countries.
Yeah.
What is our competitiveness?
I think I would separate competitiveness from being competitive with your neighbors.
Yeah.
Thailand has its own competitiveness challenges in terms of maybe demographics and skills availability, the need to maybe streamline and reform some of its regulatory code, which can be complex and duplicative, at times a bit unpredictable. Um, so those are internal issues in a sense, but Thailand is on a journey. The recent IMD University in Lausanne, it produces an annual competitiveness index. So Thailand has moved in this year's index from, in an overall sense, from number 30 to number 26. The number itself isn't that important. That's just a metric from, I think they have about 20 different measures across 4 broad headings. What's important is the direction of travel. And your finance minister, Mr. Ekniti, recently stated publicly, Thailand's desire to get into the top 20 in that index. Again, the number isn't important. It's the direction of travel. So Thailand is addressing its own competitiveness, internal competitiveness issues. The other side of that is Thailand's competitiveness by comparison to its neighbours, who are its competitors for inward investment. As you mentioned, Vietnam, it certainly is, I guess you could call it, we would say in English, the darling of the foreign direct investment community, and the commentariat. Journalists love talking about how quickly Vietnam is growing. And it is growing quickly. But it's coming from a long way back, if I might say. But it is attracting a lot of inward investment from companies all over the world, not just European, but Americans and Australians and Canadians, because the government there has, taken a decision to grow quickly, to make the regulatory environment investor friendly, particularly inward investment, to secure skills, to secure capital, to become a regional supply chain hub. Thailand probably took its eye off the ball, as they might say in football terms, a little bit for a few years. Some of that might be driven by politics. Some of it might be maybe by complacency, because Thailand has been a success story for 40 years. In the 90s, huge influx of capital, particularly from Japanese companies. And perhaps Thailand didn't look to the future and relied on where it had come from. Now I think your government, and we met all of them from His Excellency Prime Minister Anutin down last week across his cabinet and the Board of Investment, the Bank of Thailand. I sense a realization, not just now, but over the last year, 2 years, that something needs to change, or, for example, Vietnam will pass you out. And I've seen some statistics recently that suggest that Vietnam will outgrow the size of the Thai economy within 3 years on the current trajectories. But I also know that you have revised upwards your growth projections for this year to something like 2.5%. That's not helped by international shocks like the energy crisis caused by the situation in the Middle East. It's not helped by trade tensions between the giants of the world, China and the US. But ASEAN as a bloc is a success story. Next year is the 60th anniversary of ASEAN. It was signed here in Bangkok in 1967 in the Bangkok Declaration, so a lot to celebrate. Thailand's competitiveness vis-a-vis Vietnam, Malaysia, Indonesia, it depends really on, I suppose, making it a more investor-friendly environment. If you want inward investment, you must respond to the concerns of the international business community. And we got a very good reception and a good hearing and excellent exchange last week when we met the Royal Thai government. It wasn't a choreographed meeting where we asked a question and it was answered. It was a genuine exchange of what is blocking you from investing more in Thailand? And we didn't hold back as Europeans. We're probably not as kind. If we have a message, we deliver it, and we did. What needs to change to make Thailand more attractive? It is attractive.
Yeah.
Its fundamentals are good. It's not that it's a problem, but it could be better. And some of your competitors perhaps have been more agile and a bit more responsive to the demands of international business community.
What is your specific advice to the governments, especially from the European investor need for Thailand?
Yeah. If I could only pick one thing, I would say there's an excess of regulation. There are something like 7,600 ministerial regulations, which
It's about ease of doing business,
the
right?
ease of doing business. That's probably a better term. Yeah, the ease of doing business is made less attractive here than it might be because there's so much regulation. Some of it seems pointless, and some of it is analog instead of digital. There's a lot of duplication. Applications for licenses can take a long time, and there's no clarity or transparency about why something is or is not approved. Some issues around maybe visas and work permits for to bring in temporary skilled workers to
Mhm.
bring the skills with them. So yeah, the ease of doing business is the issue. The World Bank used to produce an index. It doesn't do so anymore about ease of doing business. But if it did, I think Thailand would probably see itself behind some of its competitors. So we identify some of the granular issues in specific sectors, specific laws that are unhelpful to attracting business. We understand why there may have been a domestic political reason for some of those laws, and that is the case everywhere. And the Thai government is elected um, to meet the needs of Thailand, not to meet the needs of European businesses. But we believe it can be a win-win, where some of the excess law and regulation can be streamlined, attract inward investment, create more jobs and prosperity for Thailand, and profits for European companies.
Yeah.
Mm.
From the investment part that we have been talking about, so I'd like to shift the focus. As you may know, that Thailand, we are trying to finish the FTA between Thailand and EU since we have been doing this so long, especially when we have the government who came from the election from the last time is coming back on the table again. So, what is your perspective on FTA between EU and Thailand? Because it will be the opportunity for Thai economy as well, but at the same time, it might be a lot of risk for Thai economy because free trade agreement is open market access. It means that Thailand can export to Europe and Europe can export to Thailand.
Mm.
So how you see what is your perspective on this FTA?
Well, we very much welcome the restart of the negotiations in 2023. They had been suspended, as you probably know, for some 10 years because of political developments in Thailand. But when we had lobbied for them to be restarted, and we very much welcomed that they were restarted in 2023. Since then, they've moved really quickly. Some of that is driven by the world we live in, where there's a political desire to forge new trade agreements, but also the will in Brussels, where the European Commission leads the negotiations for the EU, and the political will here in Bangkok. That will has been there. So we've had 9 rounds as we speak here in July, 9 rounds of negotiation. The most recent was in Brussels, and I met Kun Wirapong
Just
myself
last month.
just
Last month, I think?
about it was in June, I think, yeah,
Yeah.
or early July.
That's
So
fine.
I met Kun Wirapong. Mr. Supachi was also in Brussels with the Thai negotiation team. From my contacts in Brussels, in the European Commission, and indeed here in Bangkok with the Ministry of Commerce negotiators, I can say that the negotiations are going well. All trade negotiations go well at the start because the easy stuff is dealt with first. But the Thai negotiations have gone particularly well. What remains to be resolved are difficult issues around government procurement for European companies to access government contracts in Thailand, agricultural access for Thai exporters to Europe, some issues around energy, and some issues around the liberalisation of services, because Europe is what we might call a services superpower. A lot of European companies are global leaders in services, and Thailand has some laws that maybe make it a bit more challenging to launch into the Thai market. So they've gone well. The 10th round, and some suggested might be the final round, will be in Thailand in September. I
Okay.
believe it's in Phuket, so that's a very nice place for the
Wow.
negotiators to go. But I guess they won't see much of the beaches. They'll be, in a hotel room or in an office, busy negotiating.
Yeah.
But the momentum is there. I have heard, certainly from Thai commentators and politicians, a desire to conclude the negotiations this year, 2026.
Yeah, do you think it's possible?
They
That's
do,
my
and it is
question.
possible, but I would say it's probably a little bit optimistic.
Mm.
And as a business council and as a trade policy, commentator myself, I think it would be better to do it right rather than do it quickly. So as we would prefer to see a substantive, high quality, balanced, ambitious free trade agreement concluded, the text concluded in 2027, rather than rush to meet some artificial deadline of December 2026 just because some politician has said so. There's a lot of work to do. Trade agreements are very complicated legal documents, and there are a lot of vested interest in Europe and in Thailand that have something to say about the content. So I think it's important to get substance and quality rather than meet, as I said, an artificial deadline.
Yeah.
Having said that, I'm very confident that the Thai-EU trade agreement will be concluded. The text will be concluded sometime between now and middle of 2027,
Okay.
probably early 2027.
That's quite quick. I
It
think
is.
it's okay.
It's okay, and once it's concluded, you will have it for many years, and it's not easy to adjust a trade agreement. So better to get it as good as possible at the start instead of trying to change it later. It's almost impossible to change a trade agreement. You have to go through such a process, a legal process. So we believe it will be concluded in the new year. We hope that the agreement will be high quality and ambitious rather than just getting a deal for the sake of it. And all the information and intelligence I have is that the momentum is there, the political will is there to overcome the technical challenges.
Yeah.
Plus, in the world we live in now, the geopolitical environment of today, it's important for Europe and for Thailand to conclude this deal. And it's one of 4 deals. I mentioned the other countries earlier. It's one of 4 trade agreements that Europe is negotiating with ASEAN countries. But Indonesia is more or less concluded, and the text is being cleaned, legally scrubbed, they call it, in Brussels. Philippines and Malaysia are a bit further back in terms of when they started. They started a bit later than Thailand. Though the intelligence is that the Philippines is going really quickly and may actually be concluded before Thailand. It's possibly a more simple trade agreement than the Thai agreement. And Malaysia will be the last of those 4 to be concluded. But I would put money that all 4 will be concluded by this time next year. Yeah. And I think the backdrop is next year is the 50th anniversary of EU-ASEAN diplomatic relations.
Okay.
There's a major summit, political summit, but also a business summit planned. The dates move around, but ASEAN will be chaired by Singapore next year. So the summit will be in most likely Singapore, either in May or November. It doesn't really matter what the date is. What the politicians want to be able to announce 4 concluded trade agreements, and Thailand will be one of them. I'm absolutely sure.
Yeah, I think like end of this year it would be the milestone that government trying to like put some milestone first, but even mid year of the next year 2027 it would be okay for that as well because Kun Virapong always mentioned that quality comes first
He's
in terms
absolutely right.
of negotiation, right?
He's absolutely right. And as I said, if you don't deal with quality when you're writing the text, it's difficult to come back in a few years to amend or fix something that you could have got right in the first place. So yes, December 2026 would be a nice date to aim for. But having seen many trade agreements over the years negotiated by the EU, the complexity means that it could slip into the new year. And that's not really a problem for businesses. Politicians always like to announce good news. I understand, I get it, and they're right to have forward momentum. But the business community would prefer to see something high ambition, as Kun Wirapong said, high quality in March of 2027 than something a little bit less quality in December of 26.
Yeah, okay, so let's talk about more about the future of Thailand because since the government come in the office, I mean the current government come in the office, they put a lot of ambitious goal for Thai economy. One of that is FTA between Thailand and EU, and apart from that is Thailand. We aim to be the OECD member in 2028.
Yeah.
That very quick and very challenge in
Yep.
your view. So according to the FTA between Thai and EU, we're trying to use use that FTA to reform our Thai economy. And for this one, achieve trying to be the OECD member, Thailand need a lot of reform as well. In your perspective, like how Thailand can reform
Mhm.
in very short term and very challenging time this
Yeah,
time.
yeah. First of all, I would say 2028 is quite optimistic. OECD accession is quite a tortuous and detailed process. You have a roadmap. Thailand and Indonesia are the first ASEAN countries to ever seek accession to the OECD. There are 2 of 8 in a group that are seeking accession. Probably the newest 2, so a bit further back than some of the other countries. I would say that OECD accession will be transformative for Thailand and Indonesia, but just to stay with Thailand, it will be transformative in a lot of ways because it will involve substantial reform across a whole range of areas, not just business areas, but things like anti-corruption, anti-bribery, anti-money laundering, corporate governance. There's a trade dimension to being a member of the OECD. They produce a lot of trade restrictiveness indices that are very helpful to and very informative for businesses considering investing. But there are over 30 committees in the OECD looking at all of the different facets of the Thai regulatory environment that would need to be reformed. Unlike an FTA, Goria, OECD accession is not a negotiation.
Yeah,
It's not a trade-off.
very different.
Yeah, it's very different. You either meet the standards or you don't. And the OECD works with you. I know the senior officials in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs who are managing this process for Thailand, and the Prime Minister himself is leading the kind of national committee who are coordinating across all the ministries. So there are many areas that are affected by OECD accession. But we in the business community, and certainly I personally, believe it will be transformative. It's not the accession itself that transforms you, it's the journey to get there. It's the changes that you have to make to your laws. It's the conventions and treaties and principles that you have to sign up to as a country. And as I said, you sign up to them, you don't negotiate them. But the OECD works with your ministries. You have a structure here, cross government, cross departmental, chaired by His Excellency the Prime Minister. And then of course, you have civil servants who deal with the technical detail every day. I'm involved in a business at OECD committee that deals with Southeast Asia, and we have seen some of the details that are being negotiated right now. It's moving forward. Thailand is ticking the boxes, is identifying what needs to be reformed, and then of course the government needs to, from a political point of view, deliver those reforms and push through the regulatory changes that would allow Thailand to accede to the various OECD conventions. To go back to where you started the interview, political stability, a stable government with a clear mandate to deliver can do that. A government that's just about holding together or unstable cannot deliver a big thing like OECD accession. And I think when you take the OECD accession with Thailand's active negotiation of FTAs with the EU, recently signed an agreement with EFTA, which are 4 other European countries, is considering a trade agreement with the UK, I think also with some countries in the Middle East. There's a Canada-ASEAN trade agreement. Thailand's considering joining CPTPP, which is another Indo-Pacific trade agreement. You are looking out, you are looking to become regionally active. And if I could link that back to my comment about globalization, globalization is not dead, but it has evolved into kind of regionalization and minilateral and plurilateral deals. So you could say CPTPP is kind of like a minilateral agreement, a trade agreement. To stay with the OECD, I believe it would be transformative. We in the Business Council think it will force reforms that are not a negotiation, unlike a trade agreement. So the government doesn't have to convince a Thai vested interest, shall we say, of to agree to it. It's if you don't agree, we don't accede, and if you don't accede, statistics or history will show no country has ever gone from middle income to high income country without being a member of the OECD or voluntarily adopting its codes, conventions, and treaties. So I think if Thailand does want to be a high-income country by 2038, you won't get there if you're not a member of the OECD. That's a rather big statement for me to make, but history has shown countries like Korea, for example, it was big part of their leap from middle income to upper income country.
Yeah.
And if that's Thailand's ambition, OECD accession is an essential element.
When you talk about Thailand economy, there are a lot of structural problem in
Yeah,
Thailand. But when you set the goal like OECD or FTA,
yeah,
which is different, OECD mean that you have to meet the standard of the
that's right.
OECD, right? So we are trying to use that external shock to reform our economy as well. But I would like to get back to the OECD. A lot of Thai people may not understand that how does it matter to
Mm,
Thai people. Um, from your perspective,
yeah,
if you like have to inform Thai people or Thai business sector,
yeah,
how um, or is the accession matters
okay,
for
yeah,
Thai
yeah,
economy?
yeah.
How does it matter?
Well, aside from being, a badge of honor, because it's sometimes called Rich Countries Club, which is, not a bit of a meaningless title, but journalists often call it the Rich Countries Club, based in Paris. Um, the answer to your question, I guess, is by being a member of the OECD, you are forced to adopt what might be seen as international best practice and standards.
Mm,
Those standards across a whole range of areas, over 30 different committees, as I said, working on those areas. Those standards are considered international best practice, which is what international inward investment would look for. International businesses will look for destinations that have adopted international standards that are aligned with countries' standards elsewhere. They don't want to have different standards everywhere they're doing business.
mm,
So if you adopt the OECD standards,
mm,
you will have very not only high level standards and internationally accepted norms, but they will be attractive in terms of luring foreign direct investment that could choose to go somewhere else. So I think it's as simple as that. International best practices aligned with the other leading economies of the world. That is the attraction for Thailand in terms of bringing in business. Um, it does have implications across lots of other areas about the climate and sustainability. Maybe we won't get into those today, but in all domains, it elevates Thai standards to what would be considered international best practice.
mm,
And just to stick with the area I know best, that's what attracts capital, international business strategies look for places where there's an ease of doing business, there's a regulatory environment that's consistent with the rest of the world, the advanced developed world, shall we say. And if Thailand wants to reach high income status by 2038, as is the stated objective, I think it's an essential element. You mentioned earlier not to step away from OECD, but ASEAN is an essential element, or CEP, the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, CPTPP. I'm not sure if BRICS, which I think Thailand is a kind of a member of in some fashion, if that advances your economic in any way. But there are political reasons that the Thai government might want to be, a member
mm,
of BRICS. The, the the world we live in now has, business doesn't happen in a vacuum. Geopolitics, macroeconomic issues, competitiveness issues, they all kind of come together. And more and more, business has to factor in um, political issues, geopolitical issues, geoeconomic issues into their business decisions, into risk management strategies, into their growth strategies.
mhm,
If you think of things like export controls, inward investment screening mechanisms, sanctions, in Europe we have things like control of foreign subsidiaries. In the US they have CFIUS, which is for screening inward investment and outward investment. These are all political decisions, but they affect businesses. So businesses now take great cognizance of what's happening in political world. And when they see Thailand looking to join the OECD, doing trade agreements,
mm,
becoming more active in RCEP, it sends the right message.
mm,
But it's not just about messaging, it's about the facts on the ground,
mm,
the regulatory code being simplified, the investor protections being strengthened, ease of moving money, electronic commerce rules being improved. Thailand recently brought to a conclusion ASEAN negotiations on a digital economy framework agreement, sometimes called DEFA. We haven't seen the text yet, but it will be signed by the ASEAN leaders later this year. So it'll be the first regional agreement dealing with digital rules. It can position Thailand for being a regional power in terms of the digital economy. And, let's be honest, we live in a digital world. So the economy of the future is digital. Ideas are the currency of the economy now more so than things. And I think things like AI regulation, cross-border payments, data flow, cross-border data flow, those kind of things will be facilitated by DEFA, which Thailand chaired and shepherded to a conclusion. And we believe that will give not only ASEAN, but specifically Thailand, a great opportunity to enhance its digital economy, not just within Thailand, but regionally.
If we look from inside out, you from outside in, right? But from my perspective, it's inside out. And Thai government is trying to set the agenda that we like to be the hub of the region in terms of, maybe sometimes we rely on export, sometimes rely on tourism. This time is about AI.
Yeah.
You can see like it's changed many times. So in your perspective, you have been doing business and give a lot of advice, especially in ASEAN. What is the strength of Thailand that you see it is the real potential of Thailand? Which sector?
Oh, that's, I wouldn't like to narrow it down to one sector. It's a very attractive country across a lot of sectors. I think some of the sectors that would benefit from, for example, a trade agreement that attracts more. And you don't need a trade agreement, to have investment, but it attracts more if you have a, comprehensive agreement. So I would think low carbon manufacturing, anything
Low
to
carbon
low carbon
manufacturing.
manufacturing. Europe has a lot of strengths in that area, European companies. Anything that would build a digital infrastructure, for the fifth and sixth generation of telephony, for example. But I'm not a IT expert, but basically digital infrastructure. Sustainability is a big industry. It's not just about reporting on what you did to save the planet and reduce carbon. It is actually good for business. And all of the indications in Europe are that companies that have sustainability embedded in their strategy are increasingly more profitable than those from maybe a previous era who don't embed sustainability. Life sciences is a particular area, aviation, automotive, but that's changing quickly, as you well
Yeah,
know, in
because of
Thailand,
China,
because of
right?
China and their strength in electric vehicles. But I wouldn't narrow it down to any one industry, because Thailand is capable of being a player and a world-class competitor in any of them. I had the pleasure of being invited by the Board of Investment to SubCon back in May here in Bangkok. And I was astonished at the sophistication of your engineering companies who were exhibiting at that. And European buyers were there in significant numbers to find suppliers from Thailand. And quite honestly, it was on a par with anything you'd see in Europe, some of the technology and skills that you have in Thailand. So with a capability to export to Europe. And then if you link it to an FTA, not just the EU, but also Switzerland and Norway with the EFTA agreement, and the UK, if an agreement is agreed with that country in time. But I think the Thai government has recognized, economic security of the country is dependent on international trade, capturing and attracting inward investment. And I was very impressed recently with the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which is an unusual ministry for me to engage with.
Kunsiasa.
Kunsiasak, yes, who I had the pleasure of meeting last week. They have an economic diplomacy kind of agenda where you have kind of, I think it's called the 3 Cs of competitiveness, confidence, and collaboration. And within all of those, there are, I suppose, to-dos and
Competitiveness, confidence.
I think it might be confidence first, competitiveness, and then
Cooperation.
collaboration,
Oh,
and partnership.
collaboration.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the 3 Cs, it's on their website. But within that, there are then You drill down as to other things that the Ministry of Foreign Affairs could do. Where I was going with that was those three C's could fit into the strategy playbook of any company, any global company. We want to find competitive environments with high-skilled labor force, well skilled at of course affordable price. Competitiveness is, as you said yourself earlier, it's around a variety of things, but ease of doing business across many areas, including tax policy, including labor law, including infrastructure. Again, the IMD Competitiveness Index lists out, I think, some 20 metrics where Thailand came in on average at number 26, which incidentally is ahead of Vietnam. And only two other ASEAN countries are ahead of Thailand in that index, which is Singapore, the world's most competitive economy, and Malaysia, which is number 15. All other ASEAN countries are behind you. So I think you should bear that in mind when you are self-critical about your own competitiveness. Not saying there aren't competitiveness things to be challenges to be addressed, but you have an industrial ecosystem. You are aware of things that need to be reformed, and you're doing it. The turban of collaboration and partnership in that, and confidence was the second one. I mean, they are all fundamental for business strategies. The wording that's used in the ministry is, of course, from foreign affairs, foreign policy, kind of lexicon and environment. But the ambition to link foreign policy with business strategy and economic diplomacy and economic statecraft is clear to see. So I could call it, these are my words, not the ministry, but a whole of government approach, that you don't just leave trade to the Ministry of Commerce, you don't leave industrial policy to the Ministry of Industry. You join it all up.
It's collaboration.
Collaboration, exactly. And you collaborate with the foreign partners, not just the EU as a political bloc, but foreign businesses and foreign trade partners. RCEP, CPP, TPP, OECD, they are all part of economic statecraft. And, I won't get outside my area of expertise by commenting too much on it, but I do very much like that the government is taking, as I said, a whole of government approach. And it is clear from the top down. The mandate comes from the people, of course, but the government has made it clear that it wants to reform and make Thailand fit for the 21st century to deal with the competition it has and a geopolitical world we live in, a multipolar world where the old order is disaggregating, but it's not collapsing. Globalization has not gone away. It's just changing its shape and its form. And regionalization is at the core of that. ASEAN is a region. It's not as integrated as the European Union. Politically, certainly not. And economically, it has a lot of work to do in terms of, intra-regional trade that's within ASEAN is only about 23-24% of GDP. In Europe, it's over 60%. So you have a lot of scope in ASEAN to trade with each other and drive prosperity and raise, levels of income across the region. Thailand will chair ASEAN, as you know, in 2028, Singapore next year. Thailand always chairs really well and effectively and has a lot high ambition and delivers. I was here in 2019 when you last chaired, and I'm looking forward to your chairmanship in 2028 because I believe it will move ASEAN forward in terms of the Vision 2045 that ASEAN has. Singapore will also do a good job. Philippines is doing a good job this year. But 2028 is a big year for Thailand in terms of chairmanship of ASEAN. And the business community will be engaging with your government closer to that time in terms of its priorities and making sure that regional integration is at the core of regional economic integration is at the core of the program.
So we have seen that Mark Carney from Canada went to China. We have seen the Macron, president of France, went to China, and a lot of European leader expect to get close more with China in the future. So because of this tension going, like how Thailand and ASEAN survive, and do you think bamboo diplomacy still work at this time?
I'm not a politician and I'm not a political commentator,
Yeah, but
but
just like
from a
some advice from
business
business.
perspective,
Mhm.
first of all, I think it's always important that governments talk to each other. So if there are disagreements, then they can only be, resolved through dialogue. So Europe is very much driven by rules-based order. The European corporate community fully engaged in that process. When we have an issue with trade with any particular country in the world, whether it's China or Thailand or the US, we talk to our policymakers and we ask them to resolve it bilaterally with the Chinese government, the Thai government, whoever. In terms of bamboo diplomacy, my perspective, my perception from afar, but interested in,
Mhm.
is that Thailand plays things very well. Your
You mean
big
the bamboo
bamboo
diplomacy
diplomacy.
still work?
Well, I leave that to the experts on geopolitical
Okay.
commentating, but I would say, observing from a distance, but regularly here in the region, bamboo diplomacy works. China is the biggest investor and trading partner of at least 10 of the 11 countries. I can't recall if Timor-Leste, which recently joined, if that's the case. But for the other 10, the 10 until recently, China is the biggest trading partner.
Mm.
It's the biggest investor,
In
including
ASEAN.
Thailand, yeah, in all of those ASEAN countries. So, and it's also your big neighbor to the north. So, of course, you have to talk to them, and of course, you have to engage with them on economic issues and many other political issues, not specifically linked to the economy. America is the world's leading economy. China is the number two. So, Thailand would be well advised. All ASEAN countries would be well advised. All countries everywhere would be well advised
Mm.
to talk and dialogue and engage and disagree and find resolution with the largest economies in the world. The EU certainly is a rules-based economy that always looks to find, and rules-based political bloc that always looks to find resolution through dialogue. Um, Certainly, the last few years, we would see in Europe that there's some discontent about the US approach to trade policy. We Europeans have endeavored to engage with them. There's some tension also with China in terms of at least accusations of extensive subsidization of Chinese businesses who then can come out and export at a reduced rate and are damaging the industrial base of Europe. So Europe engages, and all those leaders you mentioned, the EU Commission President herself has been there, President Macron of France, and the Prime Minister of Spain. Many European leaders have gone representing their country, but also leaders of the European Union itself have gone,
Mm.
and similarly to the US, to engage as far as you can with this particular US administration. But your businesses deal with the world as it is rather than as we would like it to be. We have no ability to shape the politics or the geopolitics of the world,
Mhm.
but we can indicate to policymakers everywhere, whether it's Europe or Thailand or anywhere else, what the economic effect of what you're proposing will be. If this is your trade policy, this is your tariff, this is what will happen. And trade is I don't know if this is the right word, but fungible. It can move. If you put a trade policy that makes a tariff rather to makes trade difficult,
Mm.
trade will find another way or will go somewhere else.
Yeah.
So to your original question,
Somebody like somebody compare this with the love-hate relationship.
yeah,
The trade is like if you're blocked from something, you're trying to find ways to fight each other
yeah,
finally.
exactly. And I'm not a big believer in the term free trade. There's no such thing as free trade in some respects, but mutually beneficial trade. There will always be some winners and some losers, but overall, trade has been shown to elevate prosperity everywhere if you facilitate it. So businesses in Europe, which I guess I'm representing here today, support um, reciprocal, fair, reasonable trading terms with this region, with China, with the US. Um, to your original question, I think that Thailand has played a good, well, not a game, but it plays its cards well. It's a mid-power,
You mean the
rel-
power?
a middle power in the geopolitical sense. It's a very significant economy in ASEAN terms. It shares a lot of commonality with the EU in terms of what it would like to see as the rules-based order.
Mhm.
And I had the great pleasure of meeting your ambassador to the WTO, Ambassador Pitfield, in Geneva recently.
Mhm.
We had an exchange around, Thailand's trade policy and its support of the WTO, which is exactly as the EU would be supportive of rules-based order. Um, and Thailand, is very supportive of e-commerce agreements at the WTO level, of the moratorium on electronic transmission duties on electronic transmissions. So exactly the same policies as the EU would support.
Mm.
And other middle powers like Canada and Australia and Brazil, they share similar views. For the moment, and I'm not a political commentator, but for the moment, the US and China maybe um, are shaping the world we live in terms of geoeconomics and geopolitics. And that means that middle powers have to kind of find other ways to work around the environment that the US and China have created. Part of that is the reason behind the FTAs moving so quickly. The EU needs to find new trading partners and facilitate greater trade. So that's why the ASEAN countries, including Thailand, are moving quickly. I would have said 10 years ago the EU would have moved slowly and have had very high demands of its trading partners before an agreement could be signed. Because the world has changed around us, the EU now has a more flexible and maybe compromising approach to trade policy, which means that trade agreements are moving quickly. The negotiations are moving quickly. Mercosur, the South American agreement, that was in negotiation for almost 25 years. And it's recently concluded with the EU. India, which is, famously a difficult country to negotiate trade agreements with, the EU concluded a deal with India recently. Australia was
That's a
frozen.
really big deal
A
between
really
the
big
EU
deal.
and
Yeah,
India.
and I think the phrase was the mother of all trade deals.
Yeah.
The US also signed some form of a trade agreement with India around the same time, and it also claimed to be the mother of all deals. So they can argue who is the mother. But in any case, the geopolitical environment is shaping the intentionality of middle powers. And while the EU is bigger than Thailand, individually the countries are middle powers. Thailand is a middle power. And I think we have found common cause in terms of trade and economic policy and investment. And I think that probably shapes the Thai government thinking around OECD and CPTPP, which you're considering to join, and your negotiations with UAE in the Gulf region. So to go back to where I started, business doesn't happen in a vacuum. Trade policy, supply chains, risk management, business risk management strategies are all framed by the politics of our time, the geopolitics of our time. And, things like transfer of data across borders, adoption of technologies, regulation of AI, they are all politically, formed, and then we have to live with them as businesses. So we try and convey to the policymakers when they're making the policies what would be good for economic growth. I accept that policymakers, of course, have to think about more than just business. They have many other constituencies and national interests to consider and balance. But usually what's good for the economy is good for most citizens as well. A bit of a general statement to make, but I think if you have a thriving economy, you can invest in education, you can invest in infrastructure, you can build schools and hospitals and etc. If you don't have economic prosperity, it's very difficult to elevate prosperity across the board. So we in the Business Council, both before but certainly after our visit to the government last week, came away with the clear view that this is a business-friendly government with a clear vision of where it wants to take Thailand. I don't get involved in Thai politics in terms of who's in power or whatever. What we want is predictability, transparency, consistency, long-term planning, because those are the factors that allow businesses to choose Thailand and choose ASEAN and invest capital, bring skills, and make a win-win for Thailand and for our businesses.
Yeah, so because we are running out of time, no, I would like to conclude the conversation by one last question,
Sure.
coming back to your expertise in business sector.
Mm.
So, how business sector in Thailand and in Europe make the most benefit of this challenge?
You mean the FTA or the environment we live in?
I mean like the overall because
Right.
we can see the tension going everywhere
Yeah.
and business sector is trying to find a new opportunity
Okay.
among this time. So what is your advice for them?
Okay. Well, I would say engage with your policymakers. Um, the world won't change to fit all your needs as a business. So we would see, we certainly as a business council and myself on behalf of BDO, we engage with policymakers in Brussels and around the world. Convey your asks, as it were, okay, to the policymakers so they can factor them into policy making and hopefully good business-friendly policy making, not forgetting things like the climate and inclusivity and all the many other aspects of good government. In terms of rising to the challenge, I think you have to accept that geopolitics, international geopolitics, are now a factor in all business. Even if you're a small business in Chiang Mai or down in Songkhla here in Thailand, you
It's
may
affect you
not.
anyway.
Say again?
It's affect you anyway.
It affects you anyway. You may not be exporting, you may not be directly importing, but international geopolitics affects you. So you should, particularly if you're, mid-size or larger business, you should be aware and keep alert to what's happening internationally in politics, in trade policy, in supply chains. You saw when we had the Hormuz energy, I suppose, shock, caused by a political and a military conflict. Thailand was immediately affected. Everybody was affected. A small shop owner in Chiang Rai or Suratani, petrol and diesel and fuel and everything that you buy goes up in price. So there's not much you can do about it, but you need to maybe have risk management strategies as a business. I guess if you're just running a small food shop, on the side of the street, you have no power to do anything to influence it. But mid-sized businesses for sure should have risk mitigation strategies. If you have a growth strategy, it has to take account of the world we live in, the tensions between different blocks, between different superpowers, and build it into your business strategy rather than react to it. I guess that's my net message. Build it into your strategy rather than let it happen to you and then respond. That's too late.
Okay, now thank you very much for all of that fruitful information that you gave us. And I really appreciate your time. And please come back to Thailand anytime that you want. I'm very happy to meet you and interview you more for the next time.
Thank you very much, Kungoy.
Thank
It
you
was a
very
pleasure.
much. No,
A pleasure. Thank
thank
you
you.
very much. Khop kun kap.
ขอบคุณค่ะ